Imagine returning to the place you once called home, only to find it abandoned, silent, and hiding a secret your father kept locked away for over 2 decades. Deep inside the forgotten corridors of a colossal starship, Captain Marin Sola discovers not just echoes of her childhood, but a hidden door that leads to an ancient mystery powerful enough to change humanity forever. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The shuttle's engines purred with a steady hum as Captain Marin Sola leaned against the harness. The vibration of the craft was familiar, like a memory shaking free from deep sleep. For 21 long years, she had not set foot on Kepri 4, the desert world where her childhood began. Now, through the wide viewport, the horizon rolled out like a rust-colored ocean under thin clouds. The twin suns hung low, glowing like old lanterns waiting to burn out. Her breathing was calm, but her chest carried a weight of mixed emotions. She was no longer the eager cadet who once laughed through canyon winds. Decades of service as a peace envoy had changed her into someone sharp, careful, and steady. But returning home brought back nerves she thought she had buried. Every sound of the shuttle seemed louder. Every shadow outside felt heavier with memory. The automated pilot's voice cut through her thoughts. Approach vector aligned, visual on target. Colony carrier Peregrine, bearing 270. Marin leaned forward. There it was, the Peregrine, once a proud colony ship, now resting like a beached whale in a dry valley. Vines with faint light grew along its lower hull, giving it an almost living presence. Dust had painted the metal skin with patterns of time, but its shape was still bold. Even with decay, the ship looked like it had been waiting. The shuttle touched down with soft precision. Hydraulics whispered and the hatch opened. She checked the seals of her suit, more from habit than fear. The atmosphere on Kepri 4 was thin but safe. Stepping onto the ground, she felt gravity pull at her in a lighter rhythm, about 15% less than Earth's. Her body remembered instantly. Without thinking, she skipped once, the way she had as a child. The small motion made her smile, then ache. The ship stood tall above her, 400 meters of metal and memory. This vessel had carried 300 families across stars. Her father, Jonas Sola, had called it their legacy. He had refused to abandon it even when new settlements promised easier lives. Every rivet, every code line, he had said, was proof of human hands reaching further. Now it seemed like the Peregrine was a monument, not just to a journey, but to a family that time had broken apart. Marin walked to the main ramp. Its hydraulic arms were locked with age. Scavengers had tried the emergency panel years ago, leaving scratches on its frame. She pulled out her father's old access card, worn from years in her pocket. She slid it across the reader. Nothing. Of course, nothing. She sighed, pulling the plasma cutter from her belt. She could slice through the door in seconds, but standing there felt wrong, like breaking into a tomb. Her hand paused. Then her fingers brushed against a small edge. She looked closer. Hidden beside the frame was a narrow plate, almost invisible, marked with a tiny kite symbol. Her father's mark. Her breath caught. She pressed it. The plate slid open, revealing a simple lock. Not digital, not coded, but the kind that asked for a key. Her hand went to the chain around her neck. The key her father had given her, the one he called her pocket door to later. She slid it into the lock. It turned smoothly, as if time itself had kept it waiting for her. Deep inside the ship, a quiet system stirred. Lights flickered along the ramp. Metal groaned with effort, and then the path lowered with a hiss of stale air. Marin stepped forward. The emergency strips lit the corridor in pale blue. Dust floated like tiny ghosts. Her reflection on the inner hatch showed someone older, with lines earned in long service. but still the same daughter who had once run barefoot through these halls. The peregrine was not silent. It was breathing, faint and tired, but alive. And as Marin crossed the threshold, she felt the ship welcome her home. The pale blue lights along the corridor flickered as Captain Marin Sola stepped deeper into the peregrine. Her boots echoed softly on the steel floor, each sound bouncing back like a memory. The air smelled of metal and dust, mixed with something faintly sweet, the scent of vines that had crept through cracks over decades. Every step pulled her further into her past, yet also into something unknown. She moved slowly, scanning each space. The hydroponic bay stretched to her left, now empty, the trellises bare and brittle. Once, her mother had filled this room with rows of climbing plants and green vegetables. Marin could almost hear her mother's calm voice explaining how life needed care, patience, and light. She touched one of the old rails. It broke away at her fingertips, a fragile echo of what once was. Further along, she reached the maintenance hall. Here, her brother Miko had always been experimenting, always in trouble and always smiling through it. She paused at a scorch mark on the wall. The dark scar was still there, the result of his attempt to make a simple coil power a toy glider. Marin ran her hand across it and felt a quiet warmth. This ship was no empty ruin. It was a museum of their lives. The emergency lights led her toward the family quarters. The silence grew heavier here, and her chest tightened. Her parents' room stood untouched. Simple shelves, faded blankets, and small trinkets told the story of two people who had chosen duty over comfort. In the corner rested a shell from a faraway shore, one her mother had carried across the stars. Marin moved on, pausing at her brother's cabin. The ceiling still held faint glowing stars he had painted by hand, carefully replicating the sky of their distant homeworld. Even after 2 decades, some of them still glimmered. She smiled at the thought of Miko lying there at night, pointing out constellations no one else could name. Then she reached her own door. Her breath caught. Unlike the others, it was sealed shut, not just closed, but welded along the edges. The surface bore a small brass plate. She bent closer and read the words etched there, "Open only when you are ready." Marin stood still, her hand hovering near the metal. Her father had done this. He must have known one day she would return. The words carried both love and challenge, as if he had left a test only she could answer. She pulled the plasma cutter from her belt. Sparks hissed and lit the corridor as the seal melted away. The door swung inward with a creak, and the smell of preserved air met her. Her room looked exactly as she had left it. Her childhood posters still clung to the walls, edges curled but steady. On a shelf, her collection of rocks and crystals stood in neat rows, sorted by size and color. Her bed was neatly made, the way her mother had insisted every morning. For a moment, Marin felt like she had stepped into a time capsule built only for her. On the desk sat an envelope. Her name was written across it in her father's handwriting. Beside it lay a small slate with glowing numbers, a set of coordinates. Marin picked up the letter, her hands trembling. "My dearest Marin," the note began, "if you are reading this, it means you have come home. I knew you would. There is something hidden within this ship that I have worked on for many years. It is not ready for the world, but it is ready for you. Follow the coordinates. Bring the key. Trust yourself." Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back. She folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her suit. She looked once more around the preserved room. Every object whispered with memory, but now the whispers pointed her forward. She stepped back into the corridor, heart racing. The ship's silence was no longer empty. It was guiding her, asking her to follow the path her father had left behind. The peregrine was not just a shell of steel. It was alive with echoes, and those echoes were leading her toward a secret waiting to be found. The coordinates guided Captain Marin Sola through narrow halls she did not remember. The further she moved, the stranger the ship became. The familiar metal walls gave way to panels that seemed darker, smoother, almost as if they absorbed the light from her torch. The air grew cooler, and even the soft hum of the Peregrine system seemed to fade. Marin felt her pulse quicken. This was no ordinary part of the ship. She pressed forward, her steps slow but steady. Then the passage opened into a round chamber unlike anything she had ever seen. It was not large, but the way it curved made it feel endless. The walls shimmered faintly, shifting with patterns like water under moonlight. At the very center floated a glowing orb, the color of warm amber. It hovered above a slim pedestal, turning slowly in the air as though it were alive. The sight held her in silence. The glow touched her faceplate and reflected in her eyes. It was beautiful, but also heavy with meaning. On the pedestal below, the orb rested a thick book, its cover worn from use, and a small metal tag that bore her name. Her chest tightened as she reached for the book. The journal was filled with handwriting she knew well. Every line belonged to her father. Page after page told of years spent studying this object, testing it, and listening to it. Some pages were filled with drawings of strange symbols. Others held technical notes, sketches of star maps, and attempts at translation. But there were also simple words, notes that felt like whispers to himself. Lines like, "It listens when I speak of family," and "Perhaps it learns from what we share." Marin looked back at the orb. As if responding, it glowed brighter. Suddenly, a faint shimmer appeared near the entrance of the chamber. She froze. Then the shape sharpened into a figure. Her father stood there, not in flesh, but in light. His outline was clear, his eyes gentle, his smile the same she remembered. "Hello, my little Starwalker," the projection said. Marin's throat caught. She whispered, "Father." The figure nodded. "This is not truly me, but a record of my voice and manner. I built it for you, knowing you would one day return." Tears stung her eyes. She wanted to reach for him, but the figure flickered faintly, like a memory. Still, the presence felt real enough to steady her. "What is this place?" she asked. The projection looked at the orb. 3 years after we landed, I discovered it buried beneath the ship. It is no human creation. It is far older, left behind by a people who traveled the stars before us. I studied it for years. It holds knowledge, maps to distant systems, new medicines, and ways to speak across galaxies without delay. But it is not just a machine. It listens. It learns. It asks who we are. Marin stepped closer to the orb. Faint symbols drifted across its surface like ripples. "You kept this secret?" The projection nodded. "Yes, I feared what would happen if it fell into the hands of those who see power but not responsibility. I wanted it to meet someone who could balance caution with courage. I wanted it to meet you." Her heart pounded. The orb pulsed softly, as if waiting. Marin lifted a hand but hesitated. "What happens if I touch it?" "It will show you what it showed me," her father's image replied. "But it will answer you in its own way. It listens to the heart as much as the mind." Marin drew in a long breath. She reached forward and her fingers brushed the light. It was warm, like holding sunlight. Images rushed through her mind, not harsh, but gentle waves. She saw distant stars, glowing cities of glass, and beings of shapes she could barely imagine. She also saw her own memories, her mother teaching her to grow seedlings, Miko laughing as he fell off a hoverboard, and her father sketching designs late into the night. She gasped softly, "It's reading me." The projection smiled. "Yes, It learns from us as we learn from it. It is not only giving knowledge, it is asking to know who we are. The chamber filled with strands of light, weaving themselves into living star maps all around her. Routes stretched outward, joining together like threads in a great tapestry. Marin stood in the center, her hands still resting against the orb, her eyes wide with awe. This was no secret weapon. It was an invitation, a doorway to a greater universe. And she at last understood why her father had hidden it. The chamber was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of the amber orb. Captain Marin Sola stood still, her hand hovering over the light. Her father's projection watched her. Patient and steady, the strands of living star maps slowly faded back into the orb, as though waiting for her decision. The silence pressed against her ears, but it was not empty. It was expectant, like the pause before dawn. "What do I do now?" Marin asked, her voice low. The figure smiled gently. "That is the choice, my daughter. The crystal responds to intention. You can carry it out into the world and change history in a single day. Or you can leave it here, hidden, until humanity is ready to accept what it offers." Marin's chest tightened. She thought of the colonies scattered across the stars. She thought of leaders who argued over trade and power, who saw progress only as control. She thought of the young cadets she had trained, still learning how to listen as well as command. Was humanity ready for knowledge that could reshape everything? The orb pulsed softly, as if sensing her doubt. Her father's voice filled the chamber again. "I spent years wondering if it should be shared. In the end, I realized I was not the one to decide. I believed you would be the one to walk back into this ship and face this choice." Marin looked at the journal on the pedestal. The pages carried decades of work, sketches, and notes. Her father had trusted her to read them, to understand not only the science, but the spirit behind it. He had trusted her to see that knowledge without wisdom could break more than it healed. She stepped back and let her hand fall from the orb. "If I carry it out, governments will fight to own it. If I hide it, the discovery dies with me. Neither feels right." The projection tilted its head. "Then perhaps there is another way. You always found paths no one else noticed." Marin's breath caught as the thought took shape. She could share the story, not the artifact. She could leave the orb safe within the peregrine, but send out a signal, an invitation written in honesty. Anyone who sought it would know it was here, but they would also know the rules, that it was not a weapon, not a prize, but a place for cooperation. She activated her suit's comlink and connected it to the ship's old communications array. The systems groaned awake, but they responded. Carefully, she encoded a message. Her voice carried across the static, steady and clear. "This is Captain Marin Sola. I have found something left behind by those who came before us. It is knowledge, but it is also a test of who we are. This place will welcome only those who come with peace and with respect. The door is open, but only for those who understand that discovery belongs to everyone, not just the powerful." She set the beacon to repeat the message at each dawn on Kepri 4, when both suns rose together. She smiled at the thought. Dawn was always a promise of something new. Her father's image flickered, the light fading around its edges. "You've chosen well," he said softly. "I hoped you would see that the greatest gift is not possession, but invitation." Marin swallowed hard. "I wish you were really here." The figure gave her one last smile, the kind that carried a lifetime of love. "In a way, I am. In this ship, in these discoveries, in you." Then the light dissolved, leaving only the gentle glow of the orb. Marin placed her palm flat against the pedestal one last time. Then she pulled a patch from her uniform, marked with the emblem of peace she had carried for years. She set it down beside the journal. "For the next one who comes," she whispered. As she left the chamber and sealed the hidden door, she felt lighter. The Peregrine no longer seemed like a grave. It felt like a bridge, waiting for the right travelers to cross. Outside, the twin suns touched the horizon. Marin climbed into her shuttle and rose into the sky, the beacon already singing its message. She looked down at the old ship, glowing faintly under the suns, and knew her choice had not ended the story. It had only begun a new chapter.